The Nostromo, the signal that started the entire genre's obsession with this idea, was never a cry for help in the first place. In Alien from 1979, the commercial towing vessel Nostromo diverts to the planetoid LV-426 after the ship's computer, Mother, picks up a transmission of unknown origin. The crew doesn't choose to go. Mother wakes them out of hypersleep specifically to investigate, and company policy, later spelled out as Special Order 937, obligates them to respond or forfeit their shares. At first they assume it's an SOS. Ripley, working the signal in the comms room, decodes it further and reaches a colder conclusion. It isn't a distress call, it's a warning. By the time she works that out, Kane, Dallas, and Lambert have already crossed to the derelict spacecraft. Inside, they find the enormous dead pilot fans came to call the space jockey, fossilized in his seat with his chest burst open from the inside. And below him, Kane discovers the field of leathery eggs. One of them opens. The beacon, it turns out, was meant to keep ships away, broadcast by a pilot who had already become a victim of the thing in his hold. And the trap had a second layer that was entirely human, because the company, working through the android Ash and that quiet special order, valued the specimen over every life on board. This is the film that set the template, the cleanest possible version of the whole premise, a signal that was a warning the moment anyone bothered to translate it. Planet of the Vampires. 14 years before Alien, an Italian horror director built the exact same trap, and the genre has been quietly borrowing it ever since. Planet of the Vampires, from 1965, was directed by Mario Bava, a filmmaker better known for gothic horror than for spaceships. In it, two exploration ships, the Argos and the Galliot, pick up a distress signal coming from an unexplored world called Aura, and they divert to answer it. The moment they land, an unseen force takes hold of the crews and turns them violent against one another. Searching the surface, they find a derelict alien craft holding the gigantic skeletal remains of a long-dead crew, a shot so striking it's widely cited as the visual blueprint for the space jockey sequence that Alien would stage over a decade later. And the signal was bait all along. A dying, bodiless alien race had broadcast it to lure new arrivals down, planning to possess their bodies and steal their ship to escape the planet. The dead don't stay dead here. They get up and walk as hosts, which turns the whole rescue into a slow-motion body snatch. It's the deep cut that proves this idea didn't start with Ridley Scott, and that the best traps in the genre were already fully formed before most of its audience was born. The Event Horizon. A ship that had been gone for 7 years sent back a garbled message no one could translate, and the rescue crew assumed it was a plea. In Event Horizon, from 1997, the salvage vessel Lewis and Clark is sent to investigate the sudden reappearance of the long-lost research ship Event Horizon out near Neptune. That ship had vanished on its first voyage while testing an experimental gravity drive, a system that folds space to cross it faster than light. When the crew recovers the distress transmission, it seems to carry a human voice. The Latin is first heard as "save me." Later, it's understood very differently, as "save yourself," or "liberate me from hell." The gravity drive, it turns out, had torn a hole into some hostile dimension, and the ship came back as something else entirely, an entity that reaches into the rescuers and weaponizes their worst memories and fears. The signal wasn't a survivor asking to be saved. It was the ship itself, now alive in the wrong way, reeling fresh victims aboard. The mistranslation is the whole horror in miniature, a rescue mission that answers a voice and only later learns the voice was telling them to run. The engineer's invitation. This time, the signal wasn't a radio beacon at all. It was a star map, painted on cave walls across thousands of years of human history. Prometheus, Ridley Scott's 2012 return to the franchise, opens with archaeologists Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway finding the same star map again and again in unconnected ancient cultures. They read the repeating pattern as an invitation from humanity's creators, a species they call the Engineers, a summons to come and find them. Wayland Corporation funds the research ship Prometheus to follow the map to the moon LV-223, and the aging chief executive Peter Wayland has a private reason for going. He hopes the Engineers can teach him how not to die. The map was not a welcome. LV-223 turns out to be a military or weapons research outpost, scattered with the bodies of engineers killed by their own black biological agent. When the android David wakes a surviving engineer from stasis, the response isn't answers. The engineer kills Wayland and his team and reactivates a ship aimed straight at Earth. The genius of it is that the trap is partly humanity's own arrogance, a warning marker read as a welcome mat by people who wanted so badly to be invited that they never considered they might be intruding. By the way, if you're into this kind of deep dive, I make videos like this all the time, and a subscribe would genuinely help the channel out. Thanks. The Icarus One. 7 years after the first mission to reignite the dying sun vanished without a trace, its distress beacon flickered back to life at the worst possible moment. Sunshine, Danny Boyle's 2007 film, follows the Icarus II, a ship carrying a stellar bomb meant to restart the sun. As it passes Mercury, it detects the distress beacon of the Icarus One, the first mission, the one that disappeared before it could deliver its payload. The crew puts it to a vote and chooses to divert and recover the lost ship's bomb, reasoning that 2 chances to save humanity beat 1. The detour is a catastrophe. It costs them resources and lives, and when they reach the Icarus One, they learn its captain, Pinbacker, deliberately sabotaged his own mission. Pinbacker, severely burned and far past reason, had come to believe it was the will of God for humanity to die alongside the sun. He had been waiting out there, and he stows away aboard the Icarus II to cripple it the same way. The beacon was less an SOS than a thread, something that pulled the second crew straight into the orbit of the man who doomed the first. What makes it sting is that the trap only closes because the crew chooses to answer it, weighing the mission against the risk and deciding mercy was worth the detour. The game preserve. On this planet, the cry for help is a recording, and the thing playing it already has you in its sights. Predators, from 2010, drops a handful of human killers onto an unknown jungle world, and the mercenary Royce quickly works out the truth. They aren't survivors, they're game, released onto an alien hunting preserve. The most direct trap in the film is purely acoustic. The group hears their missing companion Cuchillo calling out for help somewhere in the trees, and they move toward the voice. The voice is a lure. Cuchillo is already dead, his body propped up and ringed with small devices, and one of the hunters is simply mimicking his cries to pull the survivors into open ground. It works exactly as designed. It's the trope stripped down to a single scene, a faked call for help used as bait, no derelict ship or ancient map required, just a predator that learned the one sound a human can't ignore. The Olduvai Facility. A research base on Mars went quiet and sent out one last distress call, and the squad that answered it got sealed inside with whatever did the killing. Doom, from 2005, follows the Rapid Response Tactical Squad, a unit of Space Marines dispatched after the Olduvai Research Facility on Mars transmits an emergency distress call. The call goes out after a test subject breaks containment and tears through the staff in the genetics lab. When the Marines arrive, the facility drops into a level 5 quarantine, which locks them inside with the creatures and forbids anyone from leaving. The outbreak traces back to an experimental 24th chromosome the scientists were splicing into their subjects, work that turned those subjects into monsters. Answering the call doesn't make the Marines rescuers. It makes them the next occupants of a containment zone that has already failed, a one-way door dressed up as a mission. Country roads. The signal that doomed this crew was a man singing a John Denver song into the void. Alien Covenant, Ridley Scott's 2017 entry, follows the colony ship Covenant carrying 2,000 sleeping colonists toward a planet called Aurigae 6. After a shockwave from a nearby stellar ignition damages the ship and wakes the crew, they catch a faint transmission drifting in. A human voice singing, "Take me home, country roads." They trace it to an uncharted planet that scans as habitable, even idyllic, a better option than the world they were headed for. So they divert to take a look. The planet is the lair of the android David, the lone survivor of the Prometheus expedition, who has spent the years since conducting lethal experiments and breeding the creatures. That homey, human signal was effectively his lure. Before the film is over, David murders his gentler counterpart Walter, takes his place, and slips away with the Covenant's sleeping colonists to use as test subjects. The contrast is the whole hook, the warmest sound imaginable, a familiar old song, used as the doorway into the coldest thing in the galaxy. The Pacific Habitat. The signal here wasn't a voice or a beacon. It was a stream of numbers from a craft that should not exist. Sphere, directed by Barry Levinson in 1998, assembles a team of specialists, a psychologist, a mathematician, an astrophysicist, after a spacecraft is discovered sitting on the floor of the Pacific. They're taken down to an undersea habitat beside the craft to make contact, drawn by the promise of a coded signal. Soon, numeric messages start appearing on the habitat's computers, apparently from an intelligence that calls itself Jerry, something trapped inside a strange, perfect sphere they found in the cargo bay. The communication is the trap. The sphere grants whoever enters it the power to make their fears real. And the signal is the bait that quietly turns each scientist's own mind into a weapon against the others. It's the most cerebral entry on this list, because the lure isn't a place or a creature. It's the simple, irresistible pull of being talked to by something on the other side. And the danger was inside the rescuers the whole time. The Reliant. A starship crew beamed down to a dead world expecting nothing, and a 15-year-old grudge was waiting for them. In Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, from 1982, the USS Reliant surveys what the crew believes is the lifeless planet Ceti Alpha 6. Officers Chekhov and Captain Terrell beam down, and they're seized by Khan Noonien Singh, who informs them they're not on Ceti Alpha 6 at all. They're on Ceti Alpha 5. Khan and his followers were exiled here 15 years earlier, and when a neighboring planet exploded and devastated the surface, Starfleet never came back to check. Khan implants the two officers with native eel larvae that leave them open to mind control, then uses them to seize the Reliant. From there, he sets a larger trap, attacking the Regula 1 station and faking communications to draw Kirk and the Enterprise into a confrontation he's been planning for half a generation. It broadens this whole subject past pure horror, because the bait here isn't a monster or a derelict. It's a man, patient and brilliant and wronged, using the rescue instinct itself as the hook. The Antarctic Pyramid. A billionaire's satellite caught a heat signal under 2,000 feet of Antarctic ice, and the dig site turned out to be a hunting ground. Alien vs. Predator, from 2004, follows an expedition financed by the industrialist Charles Bishop Wayland, after his satellites detect a mysterious heat bloom beneath Antarctica. The team descends to a buried pyramid, and almost as soon as they're inside, the walls begin to shift and reconfigure, sealing them into a maze that rearranges itself around them. The pyramid is a predator rite of passage arena, a place where young hunters breed and kill the creatures to prove themselves, with any humans present serving as unwitting hosts. The heat signal was the bait, the thing that summoned both the humans and the predators to the same kill box at the same time. It shows the trap working on a planetary scale, an entire structure built and buried for the sole purpose of drawing prey down into the dark. Hadley's Hope. This time, there was no signal at all. The trap was silence, and a company man who knew exactly why. Aliens. James Cameron's 1986 sequel opens with Weyland-Yutani losing contact with the terraforming colony Hadley's Hope on LV-426, the same planetoid from the first film. Roughly 60 to 70 families had been living and working there for years before a survey team, sent out on a set of coordinates, triggered the creatures. With the colony gone quiet, Ripley is recruited to ride along with a unit of Colonial Marines and a company representative named Carter Burke to find out what happened. Burke's loyalties never lay with the mission, they lay with the company. He's the one who quietly directed the colonists toward the derelict ship in the first place, and once the horror is confirmed, he schemes to smuggle specimens home, even trying to have Ripley and the survivors used as living incubators. The lost contact call was a setup, because the very thing the colony went silent about is exactly what Burke was hoping to harvest. It's the inverse of where this all started, the same dead planet, but the trap is corporate silence instead of a misread beacon, and the monster with the clearest motive is the man holding the clipboard. Dr. Mann's beacon. Every other signal on this list was sent by something alien. The most damning one was sent by a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Interstellar, Christopher Nolan's 2014 epic, sends the crew of the Endurance through a wormhole to scout 3 candidate planets, each one transmitting promising data, each marked by a scientist from the earlier Lazarus missions. The strongest signal of the 3 comes from the world surveyed by Dr. Mann, the most decorated of those scientists, whose data points to a habitable planet. So the crew diverts, lands, and revives Mann from cryosleep. His data was fabricated. Mann had set down on a frozen, lifeless world, and faced with dying alone at the edge of the galaxy, he falsified his entire survey and switched on his beacon for one reason, so that a rescue would come and pull him off the ice. To keep the lie buried, he booby-trapped the robot storing his real findings, killing the crew member Romilly, then tried to murder Cooper by cracking his helmet visor and leaving him to suffocate on the surface. In the end, Mann steals a lander, attempts to dock with the Endurance using a forced override, and dies when the airlock breaches, very nearly destroying the entire ship and everyone left on it. His beacon is the purest trap in the whole genre, a false signal sent by a human survivor who weaponized the one thing he knew no rescuer could refuse. And the film doesn't play him as a cartoon villain, it plays him as a tragedy, a brilliant man undone by the most ordinary fear there is, the fear of dying alone, which is exactly why it lands harder than any monster. If this was worth your time, consider subscribing so you don't miss what's next. Thanks for watching.